Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is Iron Torch 20, and I welcome you to my not-so-immediate reaction to the episode of Samurai Jack XCVII. And this came out kind of late because I had a lot of stuff to do with the semester ending, and also my internet went out for a while, so that happened too. But anyway, I feel like this whole episode was just a huge love letter to the fans that stuck around for the whole time and kept the faith that this whole series would come to a satisfying end, and we're still kind of holding out hope that that happens. So either way, we'll get started with a recap, and there are going to be spoilers here as usual. So if you haven't seen it yet, what are you waiting for? But either way, this is going to come out late, so you've probably already seen it anyway, so who cares? But either way, it starts out with Ashi on a ship, and it starts off with these two hooded figures trying to track her down, and then it turns out that they were the Woolies from episode 4, and then it turns out this was a whole foreshadowing of everything that would happen in the episode, and then they tell Ashi the story of how Jack beat the crap out of the whatever those things were that enslaved him, or that enslaved them, and then also how they worked together to get freed. Also kind of like that part when the conductor just ended up saying this is our next stop, and it's like, hey, you're supposed to get off when we land. But either way, I'll probably edit that part out. But either way, do kind of like that part with them, and then how it is kind of a nice sign as to how things are going to go in this episode. But either way, there are two plots to this episode, and the first one is concerning Ashi and her learning about everything that Jack did that's good for these people. And also the subplot kind of is about Scaramouche and how he resurrects. But then it turns out he's just a severed head, so he has to find a way to tell Aku about Jack losing his sword. And then continuing the main plot, it turns out that Ashi ends up meeting some archers that end up beating the crap out of these beetle drones. And then it turns out they're the blind archers from earlier on in the series. And then I also did really love that episode. I mean, that's one that definitely has nostalgic value for me because it's definitely one that when I had my wisdom teeth taken out, it turns out that was the only episode I had recorded. And then I just ended up watching that episode a lot. So that's one that just had a lot of value to me. And also, I do hear a lot of things now a lot better thanks to that episode. I mean, you kind of don't really think about how important your ears are until it's, until something like that comes up. But either way, I do dare you to think about it that way. Just watch that episode again and then see how important you can train your senses that way. And just feel like how important that is. But I kind of got off on a tangent there, so I really do like the updated animation and the way they just kind of updated the ways that the animation looks compared to like the first episode with the Woolies and the first episode with the Blind Archers. And then just the way it looks different in that current flashback. And then later we find out that the Well of King Osric was actually Aku's doing. And I also found it kind of interesting that it was named King Osric, specifically because Osric was actually a character in Hamlet that ended up getting stabbed and ended up getting killed. And then I do find that kind of interesting that they did end up referencing Shakespeare for that one. So anyway, following the B plot, it turns out that Scaramouche ends up making it to the same seaport that shows up in Scotsman Saves Jack, which I thought was a really nice touch on the writer's part and also the animator's part. And then I also like how there's a sailor that's a bouncer, and it's like no shoes, no shirt, no body, no access. And then this whole part is definitely one that's definitely for good comedic value, where it's about Scaramouche just trying to get access to the ship, and then the sailor just keeps catching him. And then that was definitely something that I was laughing a lot about. But then eventually it turns out that he ends up taken somebody else's body. I mean, you would kind of think that he killed this guy, but then it turns out that he ends up just putting his head on somebody else's neck, and then again, there was that one line that definitely stands out before. I mean, I thought this guy had a shrunken head before, and then Scaramouche just ends up thinking, wow, what a freak, looked like a talking penis. And then my immediate reaction to that was, did he seriously just say that guy looked like a talking penis? And then you think about all the characters that Tom Kenny has played over the years. I mean, you had SpongeBob, you had Heifer Wolf from Rocko's Modern Life, you had Cat Dog, you had... and then just a variety of all sorts of fun-loving characters. You would not think that the words talking penis would ever come out of that guy's mouth, but then it turns out that happened. Because guess what? This is an adult cartoon now. So, I mean, that's definitely something that stood out. And then, yeah, that's just something I had to address for this episode. And then, meanwhile, in the main plot, Ashi ends up going to this sort of dance that's going on in the forest. And then what I really do love is that Olivia from the Rave episode ends up becoming a DJ and a pop star. And then ends up singing about how Jack saved them from the beach from hell that Aku was, that ends up being Aku. And then I also do love that they were doing the same dance that Jack did, or like the same kata form that Jack did to blend in with the crowd with a rave, or when he does the 2 punches, the kick, and then all the blocks. I mean, that's definitely something that's, like I said before, this episode was a huge love letter to the fans, and of course, a bunch of the fans would definitely notice that kind of thing. So anyway, you get this flashback to Ashi in the next part where it turns out that her mother ends up throwing her in this like hot coals of darkness or something like that, and then that's how she ends up getting colored black. And for the longest time, I thought this was like some kind of clothing or something, but turns out I was wrong. Turns out that Aku's darkness was a part of her. And then she ends up going to a waterfall and ends up scrubbing it all out with like some sort of cinder block or brick or something, like granite or something like that. But then it it turns out she ends up finding some kind of leaflet dress or something like that. Ends up making a dress out of leaves. I mean, I do like that. I do think that's a nice touch, and I am definitely going to touch on this a little bit later. But anyway, we get to the B plot, and this is about Scaramouche trying to inform Aku that Jack ends up losing his sword, and then one of the other ladies ends up saying, "Screw off, jerkhead," and once again, I kind of forgot this was an adult cartoon, so I guess that's kind of normal. So then he ends up finding a payphone, and it turns out that collect calling is still a thing in the future. And anyone who was around during the 90s, you would know that collect calling was a thing. But either way, he does try talking to Aku, and then turns out there's all this commotion behind him, so he tells them to shut up, and then it turns out there are all these dogs, and then it turns out that Astro from the Jetsons ends up being part of it. And that is something that I do end up enjoying about Samurai Jack, is how they find all these cameos for Hanna-Barbera cartoons. You had the big dog from Two Stupid Dogs as one of the miners in the first movie. And then even Quick Draw McGraw. And then other characters like that end up making an appearance. And then it turns out that one of the dogs that ends up jerking Scaramouche around ends up looking like Astro from the Jetsons. So I thought that was something that was definitely worth noticing. So then it turns out the bulldog that was the, or I guess their leader, ends up throwing him off the ship. But that is something I definitely enjoyed about this plot, was just how much Scaramouche was getting jerked around. I don't know why, I just got a good laugh out of that part. But anyway, in the next part, Ashi ends up visiting the one bar where Samurai Jack ended up fighting the samurai. And then it turns out that the samurai ended up getting a job as the bartender at that very bar. And I also kind of liked like all the mangled characters that were there too. And then he was, or the samurai was talking about, like, the jive turkey and the turkey curve as one of his main moves. And as somebody who loves the movie The Last Dragon, that's definitely something that I can, or get a laugh out of, is just how much of the jive talk that's going on. But then suddenly Damongo ends up showing up, and that was definitely something that caught me for a loop, because I thought that in that episode that Aku ended up killing Damongo, but turns out I was wrong. Somehow he ended up getting free. But then turned out then after that, some mysterious character ends up informing Ashi of Jack's whereabouts, and for me, I would theorize that this is actually the one of the cat creatures from the Ultrabots episode that ended up showing up at the beginning of that episode, where the Ultrabots just start fucking them up for I mean, it just kind of looked that way to me. I don't know, that's anybody's guess, really. But either way, Ashi ends up finding Jack in this graveyard, and this graveyard was actually very similar to the one where he fought Aku in the zombie episode. I mean, that was definitely an intense, high-action episode. And definitely worth watching if you haven't watched it already. But either way, we ended up finding out the identity of our mysterious Dark Warrior friend, and turns out that he's one of the great warriors of the past, and turns out he is either death or some form of Jack's guilt, like carried out into like some warrior form. Or it's actually warrior's past, because it turned out in the Code of the Samurai, if you fail your honor, you end up having to commit seppuku or end up killing yourself. So I think the Dark Warrior was part of that. So then Ashi ends up trying to convince Jack of the people he's helped, and the Dark Warrior then said, "You may witness the end, but you cannot advance." Or something like that. So then he ends up saying, "Hope is fleeting, failure is real." And then that's definitely something that we do have to worry about as people, as to how much do we want to weigh our failures against our successes and see how or what's more important than what. I mean, I know that's definitely something that could lead to problems sometime down the road, and that's definitely something I am guilty of. So then afterwards, Ashi ends up fighting this so-called warrior, and this warrior then tries to kill her, and then afterwards, Jack ends up destroying the warrior. And then I also like the line he says, is like, "I like your hair." I mean, that's just something that comes out of nowhere. And there is a serious Adam and Eve vibe going on when it comes to Jack and Ashi. But I am actually going to hold judgment on that until that, or the next episode comes out. So either way, the preview is it's going to be about Jack finding his sword, and I'm guessing this is going to be pretty similar to that episode of Inuyasha where Sango had to go through kind of similar things to fix her Hiraikutsu, which is also her giant-ass boomerang. I don't know, I kind of like giant-ass boomerang better. But either way, this was definitely a terrific episode, and this was definitely one that was really Genndy Tartakovsky saying thank you to the fans for sticking around for however long they did. And then I'm definitely looking forward to the next one.